The fight was not entirely bloodless. The Grand Defiance, a towering Bravo Sea Dramond of 400 oars, fought her way past half a dozen smaller Valerian warships to gain the open sea, only to find Lord Alan himself bearing down on her. Too late, the Bravo Sea tried to turn to face her attacker, but the huge Dramond was ponderous in the water and slow to answer, and Queen Rhaenys struck her broadside with every oar churning water. The Queen's prow smashed into the side of the great Bravo Sea ship, like a great oaken fist, one observer wrote later, splintering her oars, crashing through her planks and hull, toppling her masts, cutting the massive Dramond almost in two. When Lord Alan shouted to his rowers to back them off, the sea rushed into the gaping wound the Queen had made, and the Grand Defiance went down in mere moments, and with it, the Sealard's swollen pride. Alan Valerion's victory was complete. He lost 3 ships in the Stepstones. One, sadly, was the True Heart, captained by his cousin Darren, who perished when she sank whilst sinking more than 30 and capturing 6 galleys, 11 cogs, 89 hostages, vast amounts of food, drink, arms, and coin, and an elephant meant for the Sealard's menagerie. All this the Lord of the Tides brought back to Westeros, along with the name that he would carry for the rest of his long life, Oakenfist. When Lord Alan sailed Queen Rhaenys up the Blackwater Rush and rode in through the river gate on the back of the Sealard's elephant, tens of thousands lined the city streets shouting his name and clamoring for a glimpse of their new hero. At the gates of the Red Keep, King Aegon III himself appeared to welcome him. Once within the walls, however, it was a different story. By the time Alan Oakenfist reached the throne room, the young king had somehow vanished. Instead, Lord Onwin Peake scowled down at him from atop the Iron Throne, and said, "You fool, you thrice damned fool. If I dared, I would have your bloody head off." The hand had good cause to be so wroth. However loudly the mob might cheer for Oakenfist, their bold young hero's rash attack had left the realm in an untenable position. Lord Valerion might have captured a score of Bravo Sea ships in an elephant, but he had not taken Bloodstone, nor any of the other Stepstones. The knights and men at arms such a conquest would have required had been aboard the larger ships of the royal fleet that he abandoned off the shores of Tarth. The destruction of Raclio Rindune's pirate kingdom had been Lord Peake's objective. Instead, Raclio appeared to have emerged stronger than ever. The last thing the hand desired was war with Bravos, richest and most powerful of the 9 free cities. "Yet that is what you have given us, my lord," Peake thundered. "You have given us a war. And an elephant," Lord Alan answered insolently. "Pray, do not forget the elephant, my lord." The remark drew nervous titters even from Lord Peake's own hand-picked men, Mushroom tells us, but the hand was not amused. He was not a man who liked to laugh himself, the dwarf says, and he liked being laughed at even less. Though other men might fear to provoke Lord Unwin's enmity, Alan Oakenfist was secure in his own strength. Though barely a man grown, and bastard-born as well, he was wed to the king's half-sister, had all the power and wealth of House Valerion at his command, and had just become the darling of the smallfolk. Lord Regent or no, Onwin Peake was not so mad as to imagine he could safely harm the hero of the Stepstones. All young men suspect they are immortal, Grand Maester Munkin writes in The True Telling, and whenever a young warrior tastes the heady wine of victory, suspicion becomes certainty. Yet the confidence of youth counts for little against the cunning of age. Lord Alan might smile at the hand's rebukes, but he would soon be given good reason to dread the hand's rewards. Munkin knew whereof he wrote. 7 days after the triumphant return of Lord Alan to King's Landing, he was honored in a lavish ceremony in the Red Keep, with King Aegon III seated on the Iron Throne and the court and half the city looking on. Sir Marston Waters, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, dubbed him a knight. Onwin Peake, Lord Regent and Hand of the King, draped an admiral's golden chain about his neck and presented him with a silver replica of the Queen Rhaenys as a token of his victory. The king himself inquired if his lordship would consent to serve upon his small council, as master of ships. Lord Alan humbly agreed. Then the hand's fingers closed about his throat, says Mushroom. The voice was Aegon's, the words Unwin's. His leal subjects in the west had long been troubled by reavers from the Iron Islands, the young king declared, and who better to bring peace to the Sunset Sea than his new admiral? And Alan Oakenfist, that proud and headstrong youth, found he had no choice but to agree to sail his fleets around the southern end of Westeros to win back Fair Isle and end the menace of Lord Dalton Greyjoy and his Ironmen. The trap was neatly set. The voyage was perilous, and like to take a heavy toll of the Valerian fleets. The Stepstones teemed with enemies, who would not be taken unawares a second time. Past them lay the barren coasts of Dorne, where Lord Alan was not like to find safe harbor. And should he gain the Sunset Sea, he would find the Red Kraken waiting with his longships. If the Ironmen prevailed, the power of House Valerion would be broken for good and all, and Lord Peake need never again suffer the insolence of the boy called Oakenfist. If Lord Allen triumphed, Fair Isle would be restored to its true lords, the Westerlands would be freed from further outrage, and the lords of the Seven Kingdoms would learn the price of defying King Aegon III and his new hand. The Lord of the Tides made a gift of his elephant to King Aegon III as he took his leave of King's Landing. Returning to Hull to gather his fleet and take on provisions for the long journey, he said his farewells to his wife, the Lady Baela, who sent him on his way with a kiss, and the news that she was with child. Name him Corlys, after my grandsire, Lord Allen told her. One day he may sit the Iron Throne. Baela laughed at that. I will name her Laena, after my mother. One day she may ride a dragon. Lord Corlys Valerion had made 9 famous voyages on his sea snake, it will be recalled. Lord Allen Oakenfist would make 6, upon 6 different ships. My ladies, he would call them. On his voyage round Dornay to Lannisport, he sailed a Bravo Sea war galley of 200 oars, captured in the Stepstones and renamed the Lady Baela after his young wife. Some might think it queer for Lord Peake to send off the largest fleet in the Seven Kingdoms whilst war with Bravos threatened. Sir Gedmund Peake and the royal fleet had been recalled from Tarth to the Gullet, to guard the entrance to Blackwater Bay should the Bravo Sea seek to retaliate against King's Landing, but other ports and cities all up and down the narrow sea remained vulnerable, so the King's Hand dispatched fellow regent Lord Manfred Muden to Bravos to treat with the Sea Lord and return his elephant. 6 other noble lords accompanied him, along with 60 knights, guardsmen, servants, scribes, and septons, 6 singers. Dot and Mushroom, who supposedly hid in a wine cask to escape the gloom of the Red Keep and find a place where men remembered how to laugh. Then as now, the Bravo Sea were a pragmatic people, for theirs is a city of escaped slaves where 1,000 false gods are honored, but only gold is truly worshipped. Profit means more than pride amongst the 100 Isles. Upon arrival, Lord Muden and his companions marveled at the Titan, and were taken to the fabled arsenal to witness the building of a warship, completed in a single day. We have already replaced every ship that your boy Admiral stole or sank, the Sea Lord boasted to Lord Muden. Having thus demonstrated the power of Bravos, however, he was more than willing to be placated. Whilst he haggled with Lord Muden over terms of peace, Lords Follard and Cressy spread lavish bribes amongst the city's keyholders, magisters, priests, and merchant princes. In the end, in return for a very sizable indemnity, Bravos forgave Lord Valerion's unwarranted transgression, agreed to dissolve her alliance with Tirosh and break all ties with Raclio Rindun, and ceded the Stepstones to the Iron Throne. Since the islands were held by Rindun and the Pentoshi at this time, the Sea Lord had in effect sold something that he did not own, but this was not unusual in Bravos. The mission to Bravos proved eventful in other ways as well. Lord Follard became enamored of a Bravo Sea courtesan and elected to remain close to her rather than return to Westeros. Sir Herman Rollingford was killed in a duel by a Bravo who took offense at the color of his doublet, and Sir Dennis Hart supposedly engaged the services of the mysterious Faceless Men to kill a rival back in King's Landing, Mushroom asserts. The fool himself so amused the Sea Lord that he received a handsome offer to remain in Bravos. I do confess that I was tempted. In Westeros my wit is wasted capering for a king who never smiles, but in Bravos they would love me. Too well, I fear. Every courtesan would want me, and soon or late some Bravo would take umbrage at the size of my member and prick me with his little pointy dwarf skewer. So back to the Red Keep Mushroom scurried, and more fool me. So it came to pass that Lord Muden returned to King's Landing with peace in hand, but at a grievous cost. The huge indemnity demanded by the Sea Lord so depleted the royal treasury that Lord Peake soon found it necessary to borrow from the Iron Bank of Bravos just so the crown might pay its debts, and that in turn required him to reinstate certain of Lord Celtigar's taxes that Sir Tyland Lannister had abolished, which angered lords and merchants alike and weakened his support amongst the smallfolk. The last half of the year proved calamitous in other ways as well. The court rejoiced when Lady Rhaena announced that she was with child by Lord Corbray, but joy turned to grief a moon's turn later when she miscarried. Widespread famine was reported in the north, and the winter fever descended on Barrowden, the first time it had ever traveled so far inland. A raider named Silas the Grim led 3,000 wildlings against the wall, overwhelming the Black Brothers at Queensgate and spreading out across the Gift until Lord Cregan Stark rode forth from Winterfell, joined with the Glovers of Deepwood Motte, the Flints and Norries of the hills, and 100 rangers from the Night's Watch to hunt them down and put an end to them. 1,000 leagues to the south, Sir Stephen Connington was hunting too, pursuing a small band of Dornish raiders across the windswept marches. But he rode too far and too fast, ignorant of what lay ahead until one armed Wyland Wyl came down on him, and Lady Elenda found herself widowed once again. In the west, Lady Johanna Lannister hoped to follow her victory at Case by striking another blow against the Red Kraken. Assembling a ragtag fleet of fishing boats and cogs beneath the walls of feastfires, she loaded 100 knights and 3,000 men at arms aboard, and sent them out to sea under the cover of darkness to retake Fair Isle from the Ironmen. The plan was to land them undetected on the south end of the island, but someone had betrayed them, and the longships were waiting. Lord Prester, Lord Tarbeck, and Sir Erwin Lannister commanded the ill-fated crossing. Dalton Greyjoy sent their heads to Castle Rock afterward, calling it payment for my uncle, though in truth he was a glutton and a drunkard, and the islands are well rid of him. Yet all these were as naught against the tragedy that descended on the court and king. On the 22nd day of the 9th moon of 133 AC, Jaehaera of House Targaryen, Queen of the Seven Kingdoms and the last surviving child of King Aegon II, perished at the age of 10. The little queen died just as her mother, Queen Helena, had, throwing herself from a window in Maegor's Holdfast onto the iron spikes that lined the dry moat below. Impaled through breast and belly, she twisted in agony for half an hour before she could be lifted free, whereupon she passed from this life at once. King's Landing grieved, as only King's Landing could. Jaehaera had been a frightened child, and from the day she donned her crown she had hidden herself away inside the Red Keep, yet the small folk of the city remembered her wedding, and how brave and beautiful the little girl had seemed, and so they wept, and wailed, and tore their clothes, and crowded into seps and taverns and brothels, to seek for whatever solace they could find. There the whispers soon were flying, just as they had when Queen Helena died in similar fashion. Had the little queen truly taken her own life? Even inside the walls of the Red Keep, speculation was rampant. Jaehaera was a lonely child, prone to weeping and somewhat simple-minded, yet she had seemed content in her own chambers with her maids and ladies, her kittens and her dolls. What could have made her mad enough or sad enough to leap from her window onto those cruel spikes? Some suggested that Lady Rhaena's miscarriage might have made her so distraught she did not wish to live. Others, of a more cynical bent, countered that it might have been jealousy over the child growing inside of Lady Baela that drove her to the act. It was the king, whispered still others. She loved him with all her heart, yet he paid her no mind, showed her no affection, did not even share his rooms with her. And of course there were many who refused to believe that Jaehaera had taken her own life. She was murdered, they whispered, just as her mother was. But if that were true, who was the murderer? There was no lack of suspects. By tradition, there was always a knight of the Kingsguard posted at the queen's door. It would have been a simple thing for him to slip inside and throw the child from her window. If so, surely the king himself had given the command. Aegon had tired of her weeping and wailing and wanted a new wife, men said. Or perhaps he wished to revenge himself on the daughter of the king who killed his mother. The boy was dour and gloomy, no one truly knew his nature. Tales of Maegor the Cruel were freely told. Others blamed one of the little queen's companions, Lady Cassandra Baratheon. The eldest of the Four Storms, Lady Cassandra had been briefly betrothed to King Aegon II during the last year of his life, and possibly to his brother Aemon one eye before that. Disappointment had turned her sour, her detractors said. Once her father's heir at Storm's End, she found herself of little account in King's Landing, and bitterly resented having to care for the weepy, feeble-witted child queen whom she blamed for all her woes. One of the queen's bedmaids also came under suspicion, when it was found that she had stolen two of Jaehaera's dolls and a pearl necklace. A serving boy who had spilled soup on the little queen the year before, and been beaten for it, was accused. Both of these were put to question by the Lord Confessor, and finally declared innocent, though the boy died under questioning and the girl lost a hand for theft. Even holy servants of the Seven were not above suspicion. A certain septa in the city had once been heard to say that the little queen ought never to have children, for simple-minded women produced simple-minded sons. The gold cloaks brought her in as well, and she vanished into a dungeon. Grief makes men mad. With hindsight, we can say for a fair certainty that none of these played any role in the sad death of the little queen. If indeed Jaehaera Targaryen was murdered, and there is no shred of proof of that, it was surely done at the behest of the only truly plausible culprit. Onwyn Peake, Lord Regent, Lord of Starpike, Lord of Dunstanbury, Lord of Whitegrove, Protector of the Realm, and Hand of the King. Lord Peake was known to have shared his predecessor's concerns about the succession. Aegon III had no children, nor any living siblings, so far as it was known, and any man with eyes could see that the king was not like to get an heir from his little queen. Unless he did, the king's half-sisters remained his nearest kin, but Lord Peake was not about to allow a woman to ascend the Iron Throne, after having so recently fought and bled to prevent that very thing. If either of the twins produced a son, to be sure, the boy would at once become first in the order of succession. But Lady Rhaena's pregnancy had ended in miscarriage, which left only the child growing inside Lady Baela on Driftmark. The thought that the crown might pass to the whelp of a wanton and a bastard was more than Lord Onwin Peake was prepared to stomach. Were the king to sire an heir of his own body, that calamity might be averted. But before that could happen, Jaehaera had to be removed so Aegon could remarry. Lord Peake could not have pushed the child from the window himself, to be sure, as he was elsewhere in the city when she died. But the Kingsguard posted at the Queen's door that night was Mervyn Flowers, his bastard brother. Could he have been the Hand's catspaw? It is more than possible, particularly in light of later events, which we shall discuss in due course. Bastard-born himself, Sir Mervyn was regarded by most a dutiful, if not especially heroic, member of the Kingsguard, neither champion nor hero, but a seasoned soldier and a fair hand with a longsword, a leal man who did as he was told. Not all men are as they seem, however, particularly in King's Landing. Those who knew Flowers best saw other sides of him. When not on duty, he was fond of wine, says Mushroom, who was known to have drunk with him. Though sworn to chastity, he seldom slept alone save in his cell at White Sword Tower. Despite being somewhat ill-favored, he had a rough charm that washerwomen and serving girls responded to, and when in his cups would even boast of having bedded certain high-born ladies. Like many bastards, he was hot of blood and quick to anger, seeing slights where none had been intended. Yet none of this suggested that Flowers was the sort of monster who could take a sleeping child from her bed and throw her to a grisly death. Even Mushroom, ever ready to think the worst of everyone, says as much. If Sir Mervyn had killed the Queen, he would have done it with a pillow, the fool insists, before suggesting a far more sinister and likely possibility. Flowers would never have pushed the Queen out that window, the dwarf claims, but he might well have stood aside to allow someone else to enter her room, if that someone were known to him, someone, mayhaps, like Tesserio the Thumb, or one of the Fingers. Nor would Flowers have felt the need to ask their business with the little Queen, not if they said they came at the Hand's behest. So says the fool, but to be sure, all of this is fancy. The true tale of how Jaehaera Targaryen met her end will never be known. Mayhaps she did take her own life in some fit of childish despair. If murder was indeed the cause of her demise, however, for all these reasons, the man behind it could only have been Lord Onwin Peake. Yet without proof, none of this would have been damning, if not for what the Hand did afterward. 7 days after the body of the little Queen was consigned to the flames, Lord Onwin paid a call upon the grieving king, accompanied by Grand Maester Munkin, Septon Bernard, and Marston Waters of the Kingsguard. They had come to inform his grace that he must put aside his mourning blacks and wed again, for the good of the realm. Moreover, his new queen had been chosen for him. Onwin Peake had married thrice and sired 7 children. Only one survived. His firstborn son had died in infancy, as had both of his daughters by his second wife. His eldest daughter had lived long enough to marry, only to die in childbirth at the age of 12. His second son had been fostered on the Arbor, where he served Lord Redwyn as page and squire, but at the age of 12 he had drowned in a sailing mishap. Sir Titus, heir to Starpike, was the only one of Lord Unwin's sons to grow to manhood. Knighted for valor after the Battle of the Honeywine by bold John Roxton, he had died only 6 days later in a meaningless skirmish with a band of broken men he stumbled on whilst scouting. The Hand's last surviving child was a daughter, Myriel. Myriel Peake was to be Aegon the Three-Ard's new queen. She was the ideal choice, the Hand declared, the same age as the king, a lovely girl, and courteous, born of one of the noblest houses in the realm, schooled by Septas to read, write, and do sums. Her lady mother had been fertile, so there was no reason to think that Myriel would not give his grace strong sons. What if I do not like her? King Aegon said. You do not need to like her, Lord Peake replied, you need only wed her, bed her, and father a son on her. Then, infamously, he added, your grace does not like turnips, but when your cooks prepare them, you eat them, do you not? King Aegon nodded sullenly. But the tale got out, as such tales always do, and the unfortunate Lady Myriel was soon known as Lady Turnips throughout the 7 kingdoms. She would never be Queen Turnips. Onwin Peake had overreached himself. Thaddeus Rowan and Manfred Muden were outraged that he had not seen fit to consult them. Matters of such import rightly belonged to the Council of Regents. Lady Arryn sent a waspish note from the Vale. Kermit Tully declared the betrothal presumptuous. Ben Blackwood questioned the haste of it. Aegon should have been allowed half a year at least to mourn his little queen. A curt missive arrived from Cregan Stark in Winterfell, suggesting that the North might look with disfavor on such a match. Even Grand Maester Munkin began to waver. Lady Myriel is a delightful girl, and I have no doubt that she would make a splendid queen, he told the Hand, but we must be concerned with appearances, my lord. We who have the honor of serving with your lordship know that you love his grace as if he were your own son, and do all you do for him and for the realm, but others may imply that you chose your daughter for more ignoble reasons. For power, or the glory of House Peak. Mushroom, our wise fool, observes that there are certain doors best not opened, for, you never know what might come through. Peak had opened a queen's door for his daughter, but other lords had. Daughters too, as well as sisters, nieces, cousins, and even the odd widowed mother or maiden aunt, and before the door could close they all came pushing through, insisting that their own blood would make a better royal consort than Lady Turnips. To recount all the names put forward would take more pages than we have, but a few are worthy of mention. At Castle Rock, Lady Johanna Lannister set aside her war with the Ironmen long enough to write the Hand and point out that her daughters Ceril and Tyshaera were maidens of noble birth and marriageable age. The twice-widowed Lady of Storm's End, Elenda Baratheon, put forward her own daughters, Cassandra and Ellen. Cassandra had once been betrothed to Aegon II and was, well prepared to serve as queen, she wrote. From White Harbor came a raven from Lord Torrhen, speaking of past marriage pacts between the dragon and the merman, broken by cruel chance, and suggesting that King Aegon might put things aright by taking a Manderly for his bride. Charis Foodley, widow of Tumbleton, made so bold as to nominate herself. Perhaps the boldest letter came from the irrepressible Lady Samantha of Aldtown, who declared that her sister Sansara, of House Tarly, is spirited and strong, and has read more books than half the maesters in the Citadel, whilst her good sister Bethany, of House Hightower, was very beautiful, with smooth soft skin and lustrous hair in the sweetest manner, though also lazy and somewhat stupid, truth be told, though some men seem to like that in a wife. She concluded by suggesting that perhaps King Aegon should marry both of them, one to rule beside him, as Queen Alysanne did King Jaehaerys, and one to bed and breed. And in the event that both of them were found wanting, for whatever obscure reason, Lady Sam helpfully appended the names of 31 other nubile maidens from Houses Hightower, Redwyn, Tarly, Ambrose, Florent, Cobb, Costain, Beesbury, Varner, and Grimm who might be suitable as queens. Mushroom adds that her ladyship ended with a cheeky postscript that said, I know some pretty boys as well, should his grace be so inclined, but I fear they could not give him heirs, but none of the other chronicles mention this effrontery, and her ladyship's letter has been lost. In the face of so much tumult, Lord Onwin was forced to think again. Though he remained determined to wed his daughter Myriel to the king, he had to do so in a way that would not provoke the lords, whose support he needed. Bowing to the inevitable, he mounted the Iron Throne and said, for the good of his people, his grace must take another wife, though no woman will ever replace our beloved Jaehaera in his heart. Many have been put forward for this honor, the fairest flowers of the realm. Whichever girl King Aegon weds shall be the Alysanne to his Jaehaerys, the jonquil to his Florian. She will sleep by his side, birth his children, share his labors, soothe his brow when he is sick, grow old with him. It is only fitting therefore that we allow the king himself to make this choice. On Maiden's Day we shall have a ball, the like of which King's Landing has not seen since the days of King Viserys. Let the maidens come from every corner of the 7 kingdoms and present themselves before the king, that his grace may choose the one best suited to share his life and love. And so the word went out, and a great excitement took hold of the court and city, and spread out across the realm. From the Dornish marches to the wall, doting fathers and proud mothers looked at their nubile daughters and wondered if she might be the one, and every high-born maid in Westeros began to primp and sew and curl her hair, thinking, why not me? I might be the queen. Yet even before Lord Onwin had ascended the Iron Throne, he had sent a raven to Starpike summoning his daughter to the city. Though Maiden's Day was yet 3 moons away, his lordship wanted Myriel at court, in hopes that she might befriend and beguile the king, and thus be chosen on the night of the ball. That much is known, what follows now is rumor. For it was said that even as he awaited the arrival of his own daughter, Onwin Peak also set in motion sundry secret plots and plans designed to undermine defame, distract, and besmirch those damsels he deemed his daughter's most likely rivals. The suggestion that Cassandra Baratheon had pushed the little queen to her death was heard again, and the misdeeds of certain other young maidens, real or imagined, became common gossip about court. Isabel Staunton's fondness for wine was bruited about, the tale of Eleanor Massey's deflowering was told and retold. Rosamund Derry was said to be concealing 6 nipples under her bodice, supposedly because her mother had lain with a dog. Lyra Hayford was accused of having smothered an infant brother in a fit of jealousy, and it was put about that the 3 Janes, Jane Smallwood, Jane Mouton, and Jane Merriweather, liked to dress in squire's garb and visit the brothels along the Street of Silk, to kiss and fondle the women there as if the 3 of them were boys.